2.5 weeks since I made the video on my composting method. And this is compost pile 12. Been sitting here for 2.5 weeks. It stayed above 100 for a good week and a half to 2 weeks. It was above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The peak temperature, I think, was around 132. And what I'm going to do now is just turn it and add some more fresh chicken bedding. The main thing I'm interested in, though, is seeing how well all of that turkey carcass, leftover turkey, that had already been baked and eaten, and the bones and whatever else was left, and I put it all in there as I showed, and now I'm going to see if I can find any residue of that turkey in this compost pile. And of course, my friends the fire ants are back in full force, stronger than ever. They have basically claimed this entire compost pile as their own. Understandably so, it's a perfect source of food for them all winter. So, this is a very dangerous task today, between this pile and seeing if I can manage to not get bit. It'll be a miracle if I don't get bit. Alright, so there you have it, all the mulched bed from last season. The mulch has been pulled back, and it's ready to flip the compost onto this bed that was prepped last season and has been covered up all through the winter. Now I'm going to flip the compost onto it and add the new bedding over here, and that'll cause it to get heat back up and continue to make the black gold that we all love for the garden. Alright, first scoop of the compost pile, and I ran into this big bone from the turkey. It's pretty soft, and as you can see, it's got a lot of mold and whatnot decomposing it. That means, because it was the first scoop, it wasn't buried as deeply as I thought it was, apparently. But that's the only piece I found so far. Alright, so there's the first layer that I've flipped from the original compost pile 12 right here. I decided to put the first layer, the old compost, down for the first layer, which is in direct contact with the garden bed, because I figured that the old compost would actively feed the garden bed underneath it much more than if I put the new chicken bedding straight on top of it. And that's, of course, because the old compost is partially decomposed and the nutrients should be more readily available from it to go seep into the garden bed underneath, rather than having to break down the new bedding enough for the soil life underneath to take it. And the new bedding is what I need to heat up the bulk of the rest of this pile as much as possible. So I'm going to use all the new bedding for the second layer, and then just layer it up, old, new, old, new, old, new, as I prepare this compost pile 12 going down the row for my future garden bed. Here's another little bone. I tossed a bone just a second ago, just like this one. I'm thinking that this is actually the neck bone, because I put the neck in here. It was in the smaller bowl in that first video, and the neck was completely uncooked, so it might be taking longer to decompose than the cooked bones were. Also, I thought worth noting is, thus far, I definitely have not been able to detect any signs of the dead mice that I had put in here, and that's probably because it's a lot smaller. And I have another theory about that, that the mice, with their body in there with all of their organs and juices, you know, this kind of stuff, that when it starts to decompose in the compost pile, all that material causes everything to decompose much quicker. That's why I never have seen the remnants of a rat or a mouse, or barely even the whole chicken that I put in the compost piles for other number 11 and 10 over there, compost piles 11 and 10 over there. There's 11 and 10 over there. Well, you know, in the past I had some chickens that were killed by predators, and I composted them, and I didn't see any remnants of the dead chickens, at least in one case. In the other case, I just saw a tiny bit of remnants whenever I turned it. So those had all of those organs and juices to decompose it very quickly. And of course it was warmer maybe at that time, and who knows what other factors went into it. But that's a theory that I have about the whole body compared to just the bones. You know, the whole body causes everything to decompose quickly. Alright folks, here's some more remnants of that turkey that I put in there. You know, to me, with that brown, dark brown color that's developing on it, it's starting to look almost like a burnt turkey bone. Been over roasted. That's kind of interesting because, of course, roasting is an oxidation process, and ideally, of course, the composting is an oxidation process. So it's kind of neat that it takes on the same appearance as if you were overcooking it in time. And you can see that it's got a ways to go. Those fire ants, of course, have been doing their work on it as much as they can to extract all the nutrients they can from it. Here's another little piece over here. That's mainly the backbone and some ribs. I guess earlier the first big piece I found was the breastbone. I don't know my turkey biology very well, but that reminds me of an interesting point, or an interesting thought that is worth sharing. Maybe I can get this camera stuff. Sorry, blocking everything. Sorry, I need to get some better camera filming equipment one of these days. You know, a common practice amongst indigenous groups, tribes, whatnot, of course, is to use every bit of an animal carcass, every piece of it, virtually every single piece of it, for something helpful for them, whether it's food or tools or clothing, shelter, that kind of stuff. And one of the common practices that is pretty well established amongst all different indigenous groups around the world is taking an animal carcass, and in order to really clean it off effectively with minimal work, you just, you know, get all your food off of it that you can, and then what do? They will throw the animal carcass down into a fire ant bed. You know, some kind of native ants that love to eat carcasses. That's what they're built to do. That's what nature has designed ants to do, at least the carnivorous ones. They take down carcasses. And so the natives would throw their carcasses down by the fire ant beds, and the fire ants would come out over the next however many few days and consume every scrap of tissue on that carcass and leave nothing but nice clean bones behind. And so, you know, I thought that's pretty interesting that I got kind of a example of that here, but it's a much different context, but I thought it was worth sharing. So there you go. Well, I wanted to mention, and as I'm turning this compost, there's no smell. It's not anything whatsoever. It's just normal, everyday, nice clean air that I'm breathing. And so it's a very enjoyable process exercise-wise if you can avoid the fire ants, of course. So that's my main concern. All right, folks, so I found some more bones, and I guess these may be the chicken bones or the turkey bones, honestly. And I can't say which because, in full disclosure, I did have a full chicken body buried in this compost pile 12, and I didn't mention it in the original videos. On forming this compost pile, I barely hinted at it at one point when I had a special edition that was already added in there. And this set of bones was at a different layer, much deeper layer than the first set of bones I was showing you guys. And so one set is from the turkey carcass and one set is from the full chicken that I had put in probably a week prior or 2 weeks prior to putting in the turkey carcass. So they both look about the same with regards to these large bones having that burnt over roasted look and color about them, and so they're pretty similar in the progress of their decomposition. How long these bones might last for, I'm not sure, but when I turn it again in a couple of weeks or so, maybe 1 week at the least, then I'll get to see how the bones are looking again. So maybe I'll find out for sure how long it takes. Alright, I'm almost done flipping this compost pile 12. I guess this is the third flip since I initially formed it. And so it's moved over 3 spots, a good 16 feet by 4 feet that have been nicely watered or fertilized, you could say, with the compost juices and residues over the past month and a half or 2 months that it's been percolating. Now, I thought to give you a tip here if you're employing this method or something similar to it. I'd like to put down on the last or second to last layer, I always want to make sure that it's the fresh chicken bedding that is the second to last layer that I put on the compost pile, because it's hard to tell apart the fresh bedding from the new dry leaves that we're going to cover the compost with, the mulch layer, the final cover layer that is just for the purpose of insulating and protecting the compost pile. It's hard to tell the difference between that dry leaf layer, particularly if it's rained a lot and stuff and the dry leaf layer is not dry very much. It's difficult to tell between it and where the compost, the old compost, begins, unless you have old compost for the last layer that you put on there, or the top final layer that you put on there before putting the leaves. So alright, I'm all done basically. You can see the nice black looking compost layer, which is the last layer of the old compost that was flipped, and I just need to cover it with the fresh raked dry leaves, and we're done. And I'm happy to report that I only got bit by an ant one time, and I don't understand it. But somehow this ant parasailed up, or parasailed over to my hip and bit me on the hip, right like there. I don't have a red spot because I felt it really quick, I guess, and I got it off of me. I have no idea how it did that. And surprisingly, not a single ant bit my ankles, climbed up my socks. It's all good. I didn't get bit. Yay!